Straight on. This is wrong. Okay.
Well, welcome to another episode of the restoration of this Triumph Dolomite Sprint rally car. Now, I know it's been a very long time since I made a video about this car. That's because I haven't been working on it, because I've been waiting on some parts. I had the radiator sort of brackets that hold the fans on. I made a new one. It was all pop riveted together. I gave it to a welder, and he's taken a very long time to weld it up. But he has done so now, so I can now put the radiator in, the bracket on, the fans on, and then from then it's just everything in the engine bay can go back together. So I can actually work on it now. The other thing that's been slowing me up is I've been working on the old 2500 Triumph, because that's a car that is going, and I needed to keep it going as it's my classic car that I use the most. So let's get on with getting this radiator in. Alright, the first thing to do is to put these brackets on. Now they're a bit of a work of art. Now the backstory to this is that way back in the mid-90s I lived in a country town, and I had a holiday break, so I went home. I worked in the city, and I still had my home in the country, so I went home, and on the way up, the viscous coupling on the fan, the original fan in the dolly, that failed. It was making a hell of a racket, and you could wobble it all over the place. And so I found myself in a relatively small country town, and there's no way you're going to get a proper part for a Triumph at that point. So it was a matter of going to the local auto electrician and buying an electric fan and bits of aluminium, and to bodge up, so side of the road engineering style, some brackets. Now those brackets stayed on the car for way too long. But I made something a bit better, but it was still not very good. And here, now that the car is in its final years, I've actually made a decent bracket. Anyway, this needs to go on the radiator before the radiator can go in. I'm pretty sure that I'll have to put the bracket on, put the radiator in, then put the fans on. So let's get on with that. Well, that's the fan bracket on. Basically clamps around the outside of the radiator. I don't particularly like those things that go through the radiator to hold these electric fans on. I like proper brackets. So that's what we've got. It will have 3 fans on it. This one, which is the biggest one I can sort of fit on, goes basically there. Some of these small fans that are off a motorbike, and they will sort of go on basically over that side of the radiator. So the radiator is covered in fans. It's the most I can fit on there. Now, dollies have a reputation for overheating. I've done a lot of work on that over the years. Basically, I've come to the conclusion, okay, you've got to have a decent radiator. It's all about a header tank in the engine bay, which I'll show you a bit later. And having done that, it seems to solve the problem. This car really hasn't had a overheating problem for a very, very long time. Alright, as the fan bracket's on, I think that one, I think I'm going to put another bolt down here. Because I'm pretty sure that the other bolts that hold the bracket on are part of the holding the radiator in the car. Alright, let's get on with getting it on the car. Well, it's time to put this radiator in. Well, that's the radiator in. Next challenge will be putting the fans on. Starting to get a bit cluttered in here, so that'll be a bit of fun. We'll tackle that next then. Alrighty, it's time to get this electric fan plus the other two in. Let's see how these brackets turned out. Alright, that's one fan on. Let's go to the next one. Well, that's all three fans bolted on, but not wired up. Now, I am somewhat of an organised person, and that's caught me out a few times buying things well in advance, and might be a year or two before I actually go to use them and they turn out to be wrong, and it's a bit late to send something back then. The other thing that might happen is you might use that component on another car, and that's what's happened in this case. I recently put a couple of extra fans on the 2500, and I used the fan controller that was destined for this car on that job. So I've got to order another fan controller, so I can't fully wire them up. What I can do is run all these wires to where the fan controller will ultimately go, and so that it's all ready to wire up when the time comes. So let's get on with that. Alright, that's the radiator in, and the electric fans are on. The wires, power and earth wires, are going over to there where the controller will end up. There'll be other wires, but I'll worry about them when the controller comes. Next job, I think, will be the bottom radiator hose, and then the alternator, I think. So let's get on with that. Alright, let's get this alternator on. It's a heavy bugger, and it's a bit awkward. Now, this is all a bit dodgy, I know. It has been on it for a very long time and given me no grief. Now on the TR7, same engine, it does have a better setup. It's actually the same, but this sort of doohickey, the one on the TR7 I got from a wrecking yard, and I have no idea what it was off, and so when I went to duplicate it on the TR7 I couldn't find a suitable one of these. So I've had to make do, and it has worked and continues to work, so why change it? Alright, alternator's on, fan belt's as tight as it needs to be for now. Wires are hooked up to the alternator. It's done and dusted. This wire's for the temperature sender, so that doesn't happen until the manifold goes on. So let's get on with doing that. Alrighty, it's time to put the manifold on. Now, okay, the manifold has a bypass hose. It's got O-rings on it, and it also has part of the gasket is a coolant sort of way. So, just to be on the safe side, don't trust the O-rings, I always put a little bit of silicone on there just to sort of take it up, because it's only sort of sealing onto a rough cast aluminium, so a little bit of silicone ain't gonna hurt. Alright, it's time to try and manhandle this thing. Oh my goodness, I'm getting too old to work on cars. Won't be happening much longer. Alrighty, that's the inlet manifold on. There's lots of hoses and cables and what have you to hook up to that. So let's get on with that. Well, here's the engine bay. Manifold's on. Lots of cables and hoses and doohickeys are all now on. Radiator hoses, heater hoses, well, not heater as such, the heater's disconnected, but spark plug leads and choke cable, all those sort of doohickeys have run into a bit of a problem down in here. The accelerator cable, well, the doohickey that hooks the cable to the linkage is missing. It'll show up, no doubt, and I'll come back to it later, but at the moment it's not hooked up. So there's still some more hoses to hook up, but I can't do that till I put the header tank on. Alright, let's get this strut brace on. Alright, now it's time for this header tank. Now I'm no mechanic or engineer or whatever you want to call someone that looks after the cooling system of a car, but ever since I put this header tank on, all the overheating problems I had with the dolly, all the head blowing gaskets problems have all gone away, and it becomes one reliable car motor wise. Now make of that what you will, but I certainly wouldn't have a dolly without a header tank. Let's get this bolted on. Alright, that's the header tank on. Now there's 3 hoses to hook up to that. There is a temperature sender in it. I have to find the wire that plugs onto that. And we're getting close to under the bonnet being pretty well finished, as far as I can. Alright, let's get on with getting these hoses on. Alright, let's get some of these hoses on. Well, that's it. All the hoses are on. A few cable ties to put on, but basically waiting on the fan controller. But basically the engine bay is sort of done. Next job is the bonnet on, sump guard on, and we're certainly making some progress here. So let's get on with some of those jobs. Alright, it's time to put the bonnet back on. A little bit tricky by myself. It is a rally car after all, so if I put an extra scratch in the paintwork, I don't think it's going to matter. Alright. Alrighty, that's the bonnet back on, with a little bit of a mishap. No damage done, not even a scratch. So the next job is to put the sump guard on. So let's get on with that. Alright, let's get this sump guard on. This sump guard goes way back to one of the first things I'd done to this car. I bought it as a road car. It's never been built as a rally car as in the modern way, bare shell, you know, all that. It was a road car and just had all the rally gear and what have you slowly added, and everything just slowly happened. But the sump guard was one of the first things. It's not my best piece of engineering. I have sort of made it better over the years, but it could do with a redesign. And the TR7 and the 2500, the sump guard goes all the way to the gearbox cross member. This is just a sump guard. If I was going to rally this car again, I would redesign it and have the sump guard go through to the cross member on the gearbox, so that's a real catch point. But for now, let's put it back on. So it's been on the car probably, I don't know, 30 years or more. On the sort of sump side of it, not the sump side, the road side of it if you like, I got a welder to weld on plate aluminium that's around the thickness of the head of the nut, and then cut big holes in that so that the head of the nut is recessed up into those plates, and then they welded them on and chamfered them off so it skids over, so that the heads of the bolts are not sticking out as catch points. The one that's at the front here, which has got some scars on it, but it's not been hit that often, it's still pretty well the same. The one at the back, and the sump guard itself at the back, is the lowest point. That has been worn away. The heads of the bolts now are sticking out quite a bit, and basically I have to put new bolts on every time you take the sump guard off pretty well. So like once a year, depending on what you're doing with the car and everything, of course, because those heads of the bolts are now exposed a bit more and tend to get ground away. Yeah, like a Formula 1 car, you see the sparks fly out at night. Don't you love it? Now, the other thing about this sump guard that's quite strange is it must be the aluminium that it's made of. The sump guard on the 7 and the Mark 1, they started out life as a flat piece of plate aluminium. And the way that they are, they do end up, they're bent, but I didn't bend them. I just got straight through and put a jack under them and jacked them up. And it didn't take long for the Sump Guard to take that shape. This one has never taken the shape. I don't know, there's about a 2-inch bend in it, or 1.5-inch bend in it. And so you got to jack it up, put a couple of bolts in the front of it, and put a jack under the back of it and jack it again to get the bolts in for the back of it. And it has never taken the shape. It always springs back. You got to put a jack under it to undo them. I took it to a mechanic once to have something done. It's something I couldn't do myself. And people don't listen, you know. And I said, look, if you're going to take the Sump Guard off, you need to put a jack under it because it'll spring. Well, they didn't pay any attention to me, and they just undone the bolts. And they were just lucky not to get injured because it springs. Especially back then when it was full thickness. At any rate, I digress. Let's get this Sump Guard on. Well, that's the Sump Guard back on. And the engine bay is sort of back together. There's still the odd thing here and there that I have to do, but it's 99% all back together. Bonnet is on. This is a product of a deranged imagination. Who can tell me where that quotation comes from? And there you go, making progress. Well, that's about it for this episode of the restoration of this Triumph Dolomite Sprint rally car. Tune in, same duck time, same duck channel, for more mechanical mayhem on this poor old rally car. When you'll see me, I'm not sure what I'll do, so we'll leave it on a cliffhanger. Bye for now.